Не, я думаю, я приглашу, просто встаньте посередине, и все, мы тогда просто будем подносить, да? Да. Хрвоя, Сирил, Витор, I will speak Russian, because the majority are speaking Russian, okay? Thank you. Добрый день, уважаемые дамы и господа. Начинаем вручение официальных сертификатов о прохождении Level 2, курсов по повышению квалификации для тренеров по теннису. Для вручения разрешите пригласить директора теннисной федерации Михаила Маевского. Ну, посередине, пожалуйста, проходите. Директора Института повышения квалификации Михаила Юспу. И начальника международных отношений Национального Олимпийского комитета Республики Беларусь Василия Юрчика. Я думаю, что от лица наших слушателей разрешите поблагодарить наших тьюторов. Это Хрвоя Змажица и Сирил Женевуа. Нет, пускай стоят, не выходят. Yeah, Хлоя. You can stay there. We just thank you for the attendance. И, конечно же, руководителя курсов Ирину Анатольевну Алексеевну Чичмареву. Итак, переходим к приятному награждению. Для вручения дипломов приглашается Новиков Андрей. Вы получаете также сертификат о повышении квалификации. Старовойтова Анна. Куриленкова у нас нету Владимира, но мы тоже ему вручим чуть позже. Приглашаем Деголевич Екатерину. Ромашов Егор. Шарлай Семен. Коренец Павел, который тоже прогуливает. Дембовский Вадим. Иванюк Алексей. Тимофеев Алексей. Келарша Евгений. Узун Тимофей. И также у нас еще присутствуют господа, которые являлись в виде слушателей. Экзамены свои они будут сдавать чуть позже. Это Верина Наталья, Капшай Денис, Горбаткина Жанна, Федорук Наталья, Янковец Юлия и Юсьян Анна. Спасибо. Я приглашаю всех участников на фотографирование. Подойдите, пожалуйста, сюда, в центр, вместе с... Да.
this afternoon's sessions. Please have a seat. I'm going to invite our first speaker for the afternoon, Mr. Petr Unежиски, to come and do his presentation. Piotr is a PhD, responsible for coaches education in Poland for many years, ITF expert, and we would like to have a warm welcome for him.
Hello, hello. It's quite tough to speak for 30 minutes on the topic which I've been doing for 30 years. So please forgive me, I'm a little bit chaotic, but I want to tell you as much as I learn and to make it a little bit more systematic. You know, the topic is about talent ID, but also want to speak a little bit about periodization. A little bit like repetition, because sometimes we still talk, we watch the player who's playing beautiful shots, and we tell he's talented. It's only partly right, because many factors which are finally decisive for success in tennis are a little bit hidden, especially things connected to mentality. So everything which is connected to potential and usually inborn features, it's a talent. Yeah? There are several, just a short repetition, several definitions, so please try to distinguish between, for example, selection and identification. In Poland, we are quite sensitive about the word selection because it was like, during the World War, selection was like to be killed or not. And so we hate this. Our goal is more how to find the talent and provide them optimal pathway. But from reality, we know that in many countries, selection or identification to national teams or to national centers is based more about the results. Research told us, and for many years, many disciplines, and in fact nobody discussed it, that different factors affect performance at the age of 10, 12, even 14, especially during puberty, and totally different on professional level. So if you look even at European champions under 14, you can find Steffi Graf, Edberg, quite few. And we think that it's like a recipe. You win European championships under 14, you will be a champion. But 80% of the names of these champions you don't know, because they never make it. And again, there are many research about it. Looking what different countries are doing, there are basically two different models in sports, not only in tennis. The easiest is natural selection. Somebody comes, is good, performs, okay. And in countries like Spain, it works because they have millions of players and always somebody will make it. Yeah? You don't need to be really precise because as a country, you have a guarantee of success because of number of players. The problem is in the smaller countries, like, you know, I was working in Canada. I'm looking at my Portuguese friends in the shade of big Spain. How to beat Spain? By quality. So we need a little bit different programs which, for example, consider biological differences. We all know that boys around age of 13, you know, one is like this and other is like this. And not necessarily that one will be a champion. Usually what research show, and I will show you example of the best tennis player in the history, they are different, they are behind the schedule. So what I believe, and again it is proven scientifically, that in modern programs we need science, but at the same time we need experienced coaches. So we believe in many coaches I've been working with, the most famous one, they believe they can smell talent. And it's true, they are quite right. But at the same time, research also can provide us some good information. So together, it works. The question for national centers and for the federation is, whom are we looking for? For example, for, let's say, Moldova, if the player is top 200 ATP, it's fantastic achievement, they have won. For France, nothing special. So while we look at young players, we should look a little bit different way for countries which are strong and which are, let's say, developing. So the other problem with tennis is that it's so multi-dimensional sport. So there are so many factors which finally affect that somebody is good, somebody is not good. I remember the story from US rowing team, how they make medals at the Olympic Games. They look at the guys around 19 years old, 2 meters high with big muscles, VO2 max, they put it on the boat, 3 years of practice, Olympic Games. Why? Because it's quite single-dimensional sport. In tennis, we need so many factors again that it's not so easy. That's why what I not only believe, I give my head for this, that the combination of science with experience as a kind of the measurement, it's a recipe for increasing probability of success. It's not a receipt, but increasing the probability. What we have to consider is, now we are talking a lot about competencies. Yeah? Tennis is a competency-based sport. There is a pathway and different skills we should learn at the age of 6, 8, 10, and 12. Yeah? And it takes not anymore 10,000 hours, but around 15,000, 16,000 hours to produce a player. So it's a step-by-step process, and we cannot miss some parts. So for example, if you just hit the ground strokes and forgetting about mentality, maybe as a recipe to be under 12 champion, but not for the future. We know of this. So the evaluation process is about profiling players all the time, from very beginning up to age of 16, 17, when the individual game style is formed, the player is ready to be a serious one. So the main problem is that the results are not results under 10, 8, even 14, as I said, are not giving us the big chance that the player will be successful. From my history, as a national coach, I had the players who were number 1. I even forgotten their names. And like, for example, Mariusz Fürstenberg, who was one of the best doubles players in the world, was number 40, under 12. There were many players who were in stronger countries behind 100 under 10. Yeah. So of course, you must have some competencies at a young age, but it doesn't mean that you will be a champion. So how to do it? In the end, it's a quite simple process. From experience and from science, you know the names, what is written is not important. Important is the red zone. Again, what science says, what the results of my research for 30 years, that the player who has a chance to be professional, like top 100 or better, must possess all qualities on at least average level or a little bit better. Simple example. Everybody knows that coordination is an important factor, but you can be even European champions under 14 not being really quick on court, because kids don't play so fast, you don't need to run so fast and so on. Yeah? But later, impossible. So if you look at the player at the age of 8, beautiful strokes, hard worker, but slow, very little chances. So you can have a champion, but from talent point of view, this guy is not talented. He's talented to be a champion under 12. So one of there was example of the profile which we were doing in Canada, and this is like a part of the profile which we are doing in Poland. Also, national coaches are using this. So we are assessing players' competences in different areas. Sometimes it can be measured, like speed. Sometimes it's a decision of the coach. For example, tactical instinct. It's impossible to measure this. But if 3 or 4 coaches sit together and they decide, okay, this guy is really good from tactical point of view, we can tick. So here you can see the average, and there are some assessments around the average. So with this player, quite a good chance to be a good one. You can improve a little bit if you are just a little bit below the average. But if it's like, -3, no chance. So that's the idea of the test. And things, I think, the nicest, most interesting slide of today. This is the profile of 3 players from 2 generations. As you see, they were doing the same test at the same age, and then we did some statistical calculations. So these results are normative results. It's not like in seconds. So you can compare players of different ages. Here you have 4 profiles. One from the right side, A, is the average result in medicinal ball throw, standing broad jump, 20 meters run, and agility run of players who were tested at the age of 12, 13, 14, but all came eventually later into top 50 in the world. So it's like a reference. If you want to be a top 50 in the world, your profile should be minimum in this area, should be more or less like this. But then we have 3 other players, and there are single cases. RF, guess who is it? Then AM, another good player, and Dennis S. from Canada. As you can see, Dennis and Roger profiles are very, very similar. And that's a big achievement of Debbie Kirkwood, who created the system, talent ID system in Canada when these young players like Bianca Andreescu, Denis Shapovalov, or Felix Auger were little ones. And based on this test, plus assessment of the coaches, they decided these players are talented. As far as I remember, it was quite many years ago, but I think I remember well, around 6 players were assessed as talented ones. 3 of them are in top 20 in the world at the age of 18, 19. So it's like 50% of success. It's a lot. And now imagine if we have a national center, okay, we need a base, like probably young players, 10 years old, they can come for some tests, talent ID comes, some consultations, training comes. But later, at the age of more or less 12, 13, we have to decide to invite them to the federation. And sometimes you have 20 good players who can hit balls, but hitting balls is not everything. So with this system, you can increase the probability of success. It's never a recipe. And for example, you have to consider biological age. Here is an example of again, player RF, and the best player in Europe this age. And the results were standardized into calendar age. So the real age. Like Roger did this test when he was 13. And if you just compare the blue line, he's much below the player who was that time #1 in Europe. So physically, it was huge advantage. Just to talk about centimeters, they were the same age. Roger was 159 that time, so quite little. The other guy was 175, so quite big for this age. What happens later, which is the easiest explanation? As an adult, this former European champion was 176, so it means he was really accelerated in biological development. And Roger Federer, we know, he grew up quite a lot. And again, we did calculations, he was 1.5 years behind. So being 13, in fact, he was 11.5. So how he could compete with this big guy? But there is another issue. When you are behind in biological development, you have a window of opportunity to develop speed and agility and coordination and technique, which are the most important factors. So in fact, being retarded is a wrong word in English because it's like mental, but in physical development, if you are like behind, it's an advantage because you have more time to improve your technique. But also, if you calculate this or standardize this test into real biological age, you see that Roger is a genius. In previous, he was below the average. You see -1, 0. Here, if we just change it into, we consider biological age, we see that he's high above. So looking from physical point of view, he's a genius, and he's a genius till now. So quite simple calculation, which can help us to assess a real potential, at least in the physical part. So these individual differences in maturations are very, very important, but in the end, what we have to consider again is to look at our players holistically, because there are many factors which can compensate each other, maybe not fully, but at least partly. So, for example, Ilsner, he's very tall, he doesn't run so well, but his serve is big. So we cannot reject him because his agility is lower. So we have to look globally and not to reject too early. This is the part which I've been using when I was working for LTA. That time it was accepted as a long-term player development with different parts. And if we look at the time when usually players are invited to the national center, which is around 12, 13, then in this time we have to answer the question, can he be or has a chance to be a professional player? And what I believe, using these simple in the end methods, we can increase the chance of success. But having talent is not everything. Talent without optimal talent development means nothing. Being talented doesn't mean that you will be a champion. You need optimal pathways. So development programs must go together with talent ID. If we have just very good development programs, but we don't identify talents properly, probably we will have less chances for success. And the opposite, if we have just talent ID programs without talent development programs, again, not a big chance. So in the end, we need some specialists to work in such programs. We need technology, we need science, but we also need experienced coaches. So it has to be one program together with coaches education. Because when we educate coaches how to identify talent, they will do it for us. They will help us. So even club coaches we should include talent ID programs into coaches' education. Okay, so that's the first part. Second part is more about the periodization and some modern concept. It's our new pride, Iga Świątek, who is probably the youngest player in top 100 in the world at the moment, or one of the youngest. And if I ask you, what do you see at this picture? can you see mentality? Her face? Come on. Yeah? Can you see tactics? What kind of return is it? Let's vote. We see its return. It's a first or second serve return? Second, yeah? She's going inside the court, probably going much forward. Yeah? So, can we see physical muscles? And of course, techniques as well, that we recognize is a return. So even from a single picture, we see that all these four, I call it legs of the table, are important for success in tennis because in the end, they work together. The question is, how often do we practice gym separately? We go to psychologists and pray, yeah? Or better to do it together. So in the integrated approach, the main idea is to look at the player as a performer first. Okay, you are coming to practice, what's your mood? You are coming to a match, are you afraid? Maybe you are motivated. Yeah? Then, what's your game plan? Then, are your motor abilities in a good shape? You are not injured, you are quick, and so on. And in the end, which doesn't mean that it's the least important, is a technique. So, technique and motor abilities, in fact, they are like slaves of the head. We think, we feel, and in the end, we have to perform. And I showed this slide already some years ago. If we look at players a little bit from different perspective, not like they are big and hit 200 kilometers per hour. It's especially close to my heart because of Agnieszka Radwanska. You know, she was a special player, not very typical. When she had a chance to hurt the opponent by hitting strange shots, she was doing it. She won like 6 out of 12 shots of the mouth every year with different forehands and backhands. Yeah? Did she play with power? Not necessary, but once she hit the forehand 160 kilometers per hour as a counter puncher. Did she have weapon? Of course, every good player has weapon. Every good player has individual game style. But it gives a structure. But in the end, they are able to improvise. And Roger Federer is a great example. Yeah, I remember he was playing our best player, Hubert Hurkacz. He played the lob. Federer was running, and he felt that Hurkacz went to the net. So in the end, he played inside out, drop shot, slice, forehand, exactly to the left toe of the Hurkacz. He never played something like this as a passing shot in his life. But it was successful. Eh? So structure, yes, but also ability to improvise. So this, and how, again looking from scientific point of view, how does it work? Everybody knows the word instinct, that best players are doing many things by instinct. If you ask him, why did you hit cross court? He said, I don't know, but it was the best decision. In the end, he did the right decision, right shot, so all these factors, mentality, fitness, tactics, and techniques, they must work together. So if they must work together, it means that we have to practice them together from some stage. Of course, sometimes we can make a close drill, hitting forehand cross, working on the grip or whatever. But in the end, we have to create the complete players. So the best players can do it. The question is how to teach it. So traditionally, I'm not saying now, but traditionally we were working separately on many factors. Grips, footwork. Maybe we went to the mental coach, but it doesn't necessarily fit to the needs of modern game. Some great players, like for example Agnieszka Radwanska, were able to join all these factors together, and she was perfect. But there are many players which need some help from all of us and to work more instead of separation in integration. So that's why more and more coaches are working using this so-called integrated approach and integrated practice. If you watch even on YouTube some practices of Roger Federer, and if you talk with Mr. Paganini, it's exactly his philosophy. Yeah? What we are doing at the moment more and more, and all our top players are doing this, sometimes specific way, but the philosophy is the same, is the strength and conditional coach, tennis coach, and sometimes mental coach or psychologist are together on court. And at the same time, it's a topic for another story, we are working on all factors together. In short, it means like, for example, we make some physical exercises, then immediately we go on court. Here you see, where was it? One of our top players, you see, she's on court, jumping, but with the racket. What she will do next? Exercise. And then come back to fitness. What we do also, it's quite a new concept. What we also do, especially with younger players, we add psychological exercises, like even simple ones, to this kind of practice. So, you jump, different exercises. You play tennis, for example, to targets, and then in the end, you lost the point or you won the point, come on, or stay focused. Yeah? So the general idea is that all these abilities are connected. And it has, in the periodization, it has quite a scientific explanation. It is connected, you know, everybody knows supercompensation concept, that in the end, if you respect biological rules, specific of the game, you will getting more success. One example, we often use different kinds of interval training for agility or usually for tennis-specific endurance. But when we do it on court, some coaches that are killing players, and lactate is like 12, 13 millimoles, which means they are dying. In tennis, during the match, the lactate seldom goes over 2 millimoles. 6 millimoles. 2 millimoles not possible. Yeah, you're laughing at me. So, again, even when we work on endurance, there is no need to kill the player. And in the periodization, when we are using this waving concept, so we go up with the load, then we are going a little bit down. It's like different weeks, different microcycles. We can make this kind of modern integrated practice sometimes once per week. And it's absolutely enough to keep endurance of the player on sufficient level. One example of this girl, she never, in the last 4 years, she never ran like cross in the mountains. Yeah, especially going down in the mountains is not so safe. Eh? But when she had research in the national team, her VO2 max was like this. Her speed was okay. The only thing what she was missing a little bit was a dynamic power. So it was good conclusion. You must improve dynamic power. And in one of the matches, she scored the world record in hitting balls over the net. It was in the final of one of the challengers, 460 something shots without in one rally. So not making classical endurance, she was able to endure even such long rallies. And what's the advantage of such progress? Instead of making separately endurance, separately speed, tactics, technique, and so on, in many moments, I'm not saying that always, in many moments we can combine it together. So we save time. Player has more time to rest, more time to meet the family, to have a normal life. And in the end, the training loads are lower, but progression is incredible. And what we are watching with our young players who are doing is, we are really surprised with the progress they are making, because we never thought they would be so good as they are. Yeah, so if we plan, this is a typical, like a theme of microcycles in the National Training Center. Players are coming, they have 1 week, and then the question is how to do it. Yeah? Looking from my perspective, the easiest is to plan integrated practices. One focused on endurance, where loads are a little bit higher. Unfortunately, I don't have so much time to explain everything, but it's written in the ITF Coaches Review in August, last August, I think. And one with the speed, so a little bit different loads, shorter exercise, more sprints, agility. So this is the base. And then the question is, what kind of skills do you like to teach? What I learned running courses for ITF, there is a list of competencies players should learn. For example, how to change from cross court to down the line. In which moment use the spin. How to change the rhythm of the game. So there are competencies. And when we are setting up the goals, for example, for 1 week, usually 1 week, 4 or 5 practices are enough to improve something. Not necessarily, of course, making a champion, but at least enough. And when we have 7 days per week, we can make 5 practices easily. So it's enough time to learn something, and at the same time to coordinate it with the strength and conditional, and these two integrated practice. And using game-based approach, what do you think? What would be the last practice on Saturday morning, endurance, so it's quite heavy. What would we do Saturday afternoon? Players are a little bit tired after integrated practice. Matches. Why? Because everything what you were doing, even separately, strength, mentality, in the end, they come together in the match situation. So even when we work with 11 years old, we practice with some top under 12 players. And of course, we cannot kill them because they are before puberty, so the loads are very low. But in the end, after integrated practice focus on speed, what we do? They play match. And what we see that even being a little bit tired, the body behaves like a lazy. What happens when you are tired and you have to play a match? The body automatically reduces tension in muscles, and they start to play more fluently. So what was a real surprise at the beginning when we start using this concept, that the last exercises of the week, like hitting targets, for example, they were most successful. Sometimes they were 100% balls in the target. Normally, before the warm-up, or in like using other concepts, they were hitting like 70-80% to the target. Suddenly, using all these things together in the right process, in the end of microcycle, we have seen huge progress. I don't have enough time it would be the best to show it on court, and you would see the real progress of the players. So even the parents who were not, like experts in tennis, they were coming out, what happened with my player? 1 hour ago, she was playing like this, now she's playing like this. It's just a matter how to plan it. Okay, so special, where is my friend from Ukraine? Marina, your player. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piotr, for a very nice presentation. We have a small present for you. Yes. Thank you. And now we move on to the next presentation. I'm inviting Cyril Женевуа. He is a specialist in biomechanics, teacher at the University of Lyon, and working with us as an ITF expert in many programs.
Okay, just first question, are you still alive? We do a test? First test. If I say it was friendship, after? Tennis, okay. Not sure that you are awake. Okay, so my presentation is about training load monitoring and injury prevention. I've decided to change a little bit the contents just in order to avoid you sleeping, because sometimes it can be very boring. So there is the first part about general information about training load monitoring in the context of training center. And the second part will be more practical about shoulder injury, risk of shoulder injury related to the serve technique. So it will be for coaches, a practical aspect. So first thing, why training load monitoring? From a scientific point of view, there is a lot of interest about this topic, and there is some group of experts that are asked to make some, what we call review of literature about the relations between the load and the risk of injury, but also the load and the risk of illness, okay? And from a tennis-specific point of view, it's Prim and Drew that make a paper, and the role now in tennis is to find what are the best data, the measures that are the most adapted to the tennis players. Regarding the basic recommendations, because most of the papers are about team sports, because it's problematic about team sports, you have players, you have non-players, you have substitutes and so on. The load has always to be prescribed from an individual and flexible basis. That is National Tennis Center or Tennis Academy, where you always work with a group of players. At a time, you have to answer, is it the real thing? Is it the same thing that we do with all the players at the same time, or no? The evolution of the training load. It was very interesting to see the presentation of Piotr. Sometimes, when you are in training center with players from clubs, you say, okay, we have 1 week, we have to train, big volume, big intensity. The problem that this kind of players sometimes are not used to make this load. So there is from traditional schedule in club and then into National Academy, some peaks, what we call spikes on training load, and sometimes there is not injured at these times, but 2 weeks after, you start with some problems. So just be careful at this kind of things. And then the conclusion that you have to monitor your training from a regular basis. So there is now different tools, very easy tools to apply with iPhone, with some web, so you can do it. So just for you, what is load? Sometimes the meaning of load is always the training. That is what you do on the courts. But the conception of load is much broad. You have the training, you have the competition, but you have also all that is around. When you take the flight, the travel, the school, all the other recreational activity, the party of the Saturday night, and so on. The family, the context of the family, if you are happy at home or no, all this is a load. The the first one that you are about out is the external load. External load is your activity. When you run, when you hit the balls, when we swim, it's what you do, what is visible. You have now different tools that are not expensive at all that you can use. So the GPS for accelerometer, dynamometers. You have the video motion analysis, and you have also notational analysis just to have a broader data. All the soccer, basketball, handball of the team have sometimes one guy who is just specialized to analyze the data and to give to the coach the results. It was a paper for ITF Coaching Sport Science Review. We asked students at university just to monitor the load with the pop-up Babola. It's a wristband, just to see and to show to the coaches during 1 week, your players in average, how many strokes serve, forehand, backhand, just to see if matches the reality of the competition. That is, did you serve, did you make enough serve during a week regarding the contents of the match? Do you make a lot of forehand regarding the backhand and so on? So you see, it's relatively easy to have data just by initial sensor on the wrist. You can have also on the racket. The second one, it's the internal load. The internal load, it's maybe the most important one. It's how you react to the external load. I take an example. If I am able to run 10 kilometers at 15 kilometers an hour, it's easy for me. If I do it with someone who struggle to run at 10 kilometers an hour, we run 10 kilometers. But for me, at 15, it's easy for me, and for my partner, it's completely wrong. So the same drill, if I play with Rui, I think I play cross-court forehand with Rui. After 5 minutes, I think it was lasting at a rim wrong. It's always the same drill. It's the same external load, but it's not the same from internal point of view. So the internal load, it can be physiologic, so you have the heart rate variability. I don't want to go to the details, the lactate, but also the psychological factors. RPE, rate of perceived exertion. I don't know if Gary yesterday talked about this données. Rate of perceived exertion is just a note from 0 to 10. It's the Borg scale. You ask the players, how do you feel? How hard it was? So 0 is nothing, you sleep, and 10 it's maximal activity. We use this kind of data to measure internal load, whatever the activities. Mental exertion and wellness questionnaires, it's just to see how you feel the previous day from training. This example, to the right, HRV for training, is just an app that you have with which you have the heart rate variability every morning. And depending on the questionnaires and the answers, the apps say, okay, go for it, or maybe you have to calm down this morning. Just to show you how it works, you enter with the apps, different answer, how you feel your training from the last day, how you physically feel this morning, and sometimes, that is very interesting, traveling, alcohol intake, I think it's, no, Vae is not here, so be careful, nothing a little too much, and I have sick today. And by analyze all this data, the apps is able to say, okay, the fitness is here, you can do what you have planned, or sometimes it will be a good thing just to light your load. You just have an advice from the apps to say, no problem for you, or maybe try to do it differently. Last part for the training load, what are for you the source of risk injuries. Do you have an idea for the risk of injuries, the sources? No? Let's get started. We start with the factors on which you can focus on. Training load, normally the coach decides, so it's your job. Cumulative load is the summation of all your sessions. Week-to-week load increase is the way we make 1 week. The second week normally has to be slightly increased. High-low acute chronic ratio, I don't want to go to the details, but it's just what you do this week regarding what you did over the 4 last weeks. Spikes in loads, it's when you make something very increased from the weeks to another weeks. Competition schedule, the same thing. The coach normally can impact the game-to-training ratio. You decide how many tournaments you have to do in a certain period. It's your job. Lots of playing time, the same thing. What you can't master is not in red. Number of traveling, number of matches during a tournament. And from the other factors, technique, we'll see why for the second part. Inadequate warm-up. It seems logical, but sometimes just during the warm-up, if you make some errors, you can have impact some weeks after. Poor fitness, it seems logical that if you are not fit enough, your body can't sustain a long time training and even more the competition. Pietre talked about the age. In a training center, you can have under 14 players. You do exactly the same thing. If one of the players is just under the age, from biological point of view, the internal load will not be the same as the other one. So the same thing, it's very important to have the biological age and not the chronological age when you regard, notably on the physical coaching. Be clear. Gender. How to do with girls players? You have a group of girl players. We know that the menstruation cycle impacts the performance. What to do if you have 1 girl between 4 who are in this period? Certainly, the internal load will not be the same. So you see that all these factors can be aggravating factors for the internal load. So just open your mind to say, okay, 4 girls in the same times, maybe it's not the same thing. The other thing, the training schedule is your job. How you make the load in the weeks, how many sessions you make at very high intensity, how many at low intensity, and be careful, if you make only low intensity, you are at risk of injury because your body doesn't adapt enough sufficiently for the competition and the other way. Lifestyle. In training center, normally the players slept in the training center or no? In Portugal? Okay. So this kind is also the role of the director or the coach of the training center. Are you sure that your players take off the light at 10 and not after with the phones? All this poor sleep quality are the role of the parents in house, but in training center, it's your job. Effect of training load, we finished on this one. Positive effect, negative effect. Positive, you increase the performance. Negative effect, that is the fatigue. You increase the fatigue and you are at risk of injury and decreased performance. If you want all this data, I like the PDF to Victor. Don't just ask to Victor the PDF because I will stop here. After there is what we call acute chronic ratio. I don't want to give you more details. So we go to the second part, injury prevention. Sorry. You have some data as to go. What shoulder injury? Because it's the main part of the body that is overused. If you take in consideration the number of strokes you play in a game, 75% are serve and forehand. That is its internal rotation of the shoulders. 2/3 of the injuries are overuse injuries. That is the repeated same shot, repeated load on the same tendons, same muscles. And 1/3 are due to traumatic event. That is, you slide, you strain. Okay, so something ridiculous. Most of the injuries are chronic injuries. What happened with the shoulder of the tennis players? If you don't do specific training, you repeat this. Your shoulder starts to be less flexible in this way, so you decrease the range of motion, and you increase the external range of motion. That is, you have your balls that starts to go a little more against the capsule and make more contact. Normally, you have the balls in the sockets, like that, and normally, that don't move. If you start to have imbalances, you start to have some movement of the humeral head and contact the tendons each time you serve. So each time you have this pain, it's just because the tendons are for contact. That's for flexibility. In other way, for the strength, you increase the strength in this way, and on this way, if you don't, be careful, the same thing, your socket is not stable enough. So, simple things for the tennis players, from a daily basis, you have to stretch the internal rotators, and you have to strengthen the external rotators. So it's two basic tools, but you have to do it very regularly. Regarding the pathomechanical factors of the serve, there is studies who just compare some players with chronic injuries to the shoulders with other players without. First thing that we see is if the hips, positioning of the hips is earlier to the net regarding that of the shoulders, you are at risk of injury. So if you see the curve, the non-injured players starting at more than 90 degrees at the peak, and the other one who are slightly more facing the net. We'll talk about the foot up after, but you can see that the foot up technique is the worst. If you don't master correctly the way you bring your back foot, you can easily find yourself with this orientation of the hips. If you are like that, there's no problem. If you start to push in this position, you accentuate this rotation of the hips before that of the shoulders. The second point is relative to what we call hyperangulation. Hyperangulation is the line of the shoulder. If your elbow is behind this line, you have what we call hyperangulation. And this study shows that when you reach the maximal external rotation, if you are in these situations, in these positions, there is risk of injury. If your elbow starts to pass behind this line at this moment, it's normal. Okay, so it's 2 points. The hips and this positioning at external rotation are 2 factors of injuries for the shoulder. I don't know if you are aware with this concept, somehow sure, because of the seminars, but there is 2 kinds of kinetic chain for the serve. There is a good one that we call the push serve, that is the body go to the ball naturally with the summation and forces. And what we call the pull serve, where you have to use the trunk and the shoulders to catch the ineffectiveness of the drive. So it's not depending on the platform or foot up technique. It's why I add birdage. But it's most common with foot up technique. Why? Because with the foot up technique, if you bring back your back foot to to the side, the hips facing the net, and you have this delay to catch with the trunk. So most of the abdominal injuries and shoulder injuries are due to a foot-up technique that is ineffective. So for you coaches, just take a look at your players when they start to leave the ground. Just take a look at the hips. If the hips face to the side, there is no problem. It's at this time the hips are facing the net. There is a lot of constraint. You want to... Sorry. So you can have a loading position. It's the most interesting way. In a serve, you don't move at this time. So it's very easy with the camera to have this positioning. There is some factors, the knee bends. There is a certain level to have. If you have with straight legs, you don't use your legs correctly, so you impact more demands on the shoulder. Hip rotation that we saw, if you are sufficiently rotate or turn regarding the baseline, there is no problem. If the hips start to be facing a little more the net at this time, you are at risk injury. Posterior tilt, something that you have. Posterior tilt of the hips is that my back hips is slightly lower than the first one, the front one, okay? Just this tilt. Why? Because after we need to go in the opposite and to reverse. Hip lean. There is a big discussion, but do you think that the banana is a matter of pushing the hips in front? You know the shape of the banana. How do you obtain this shape? That is, you as a coach, as you ask your player to push the hips in front. You have the answer now, you can do. Yes or no? So the banana exists. It's a good tool. But how you move in this position? The bad things, the bad way is when you push. Okay. The right way is just because you turn and you load the back leg, you have this position. You are ineffective in a position where you can push effectively. So when you ask your player to push the hip forward, you can be sure that there is no leg drive at all, and all the load is on this part of the body. Okay, so just be careful. You don't push the hips, you just rotate and you load, and you are in this shape. I'm on time. Sorry, but I have to show something. The X angle, it's the differentiation between the shoulder line and the hips line. So you have to be a little more angled from the shoulders than from the hips. It's natural. Make 30 degrees, it's natural. You don't have to go completely wrong, like this one. So you just have to feel that you are a little more stretch on this part. Front rotation axis. If you rotate, it's on this way. We don't go on this way on the loading position. I don't know what are the guy who spoke on the fractures on the back, lower back. By repeating this movement, you put a lot of pressure on the lumbar. Okay. So we go on this position, we don't move on this one. So just be careful to rotate on this axis and this one, and not on this one on the loading position. Part of the arm, there is a lot of misconception of where you have to put your elbow regarding the line of the shoulders. Sometimes we ask players to pull to have a little more rotation. It's the shoulder rotation that lets the elbow behind. It's not a movement, separated movement. So you have to stay with this plan It's very interesting to stay like that and not to try to pull the elbow back. If you pull the elbow back, you increase the hyperangulation. And then the last one, assessment of kinetic chain. You have a push serve or you're on a pull leg. I just want to finish with this kind of image. You have the guy who said the foot up techniques is the best one because you go higher normally than platform. Federer, platform. Murray, foot up. So it doesn't matter of what is the best, it's what is the most adapted to the players and how you use it correctly. The 165% of body weight, you have your 8. Normally, the average of the players is 150. All the studies, scientific studies, with 150. If you are below that, that's a matter of non-use correctly the leg. If you are above, like Federer, it's you use correctly the leg drive and you are powerful. So just have in mind that it's not foot back, foot up, one is better than the other, it's just the way you use it correctly or not. And as a coach, just have this in mind. It was just for the monitoring, but just make it simple. That is, we have a lot of tools. Just try to find the ones who are very useful and easy of application for your players. Thank you for listening. I'm on time.
Thank you very much, Cyril,
I
for
catch up
this
the delay.
presentation. So we'll have Cyril after the coffee breaks for some questions. So now we move directly to the final presentation of today with Karl Мэйs. Round of applause, please, for him. You're now. Yeah, you do it now. You go now.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Cyril asked if you're still awake. I'm asking if you still can cope with the heat, because this is something that I did not expect coming to Minsk. But well done for hanging in there, everybody. I would like to start with the end of Cyril's presentation, where he's talking about simplicity, because I'm going to give you a few examples of the use of technology, and everything that is in this 21st century is available. And I think one important message that I would like you to take home is try to be creative, try to, use all the data that is there, but you have to keep it simple, especially for the players. We as coaches, I think, can absorb a little bit more information, but we always have to think about the end product, and that's the player. Yesterday, I commented on a few things about the difference between working for a national tennis center or a governing body and working in an academy. The last 5 years, I have stopped working as a consultant for Norwegian Tennis Federation, and I'm gone completely private and running the Kim Klийsтерs Academy. I would like to just give you a small overview of what we're doing, because it's important to pick them up on technology.
It's a very small academy, but personal. We like to take the personal approach and make sure that everybody's happy with what they receive.
Well, at the Kim Klийsтерs Academy, we try to offer a holistic approach. This is for the training programs, where we try to cover all bases, but also in terms of competition. We try to offer opportunities for the young up-and-coming juniors to start competing internationally.
Tennis is a sport that you need to learn already from a young age. You have to learn how to be able to have the hand-eye coordination, and we like to call it a boutique kind of academy. I try to really take in all the experiences that I had from traveling all over the world and learning myself. I'm still very passionate about tennis, and I would like that to be carried over to what happens on court, and I think we've succeeded so far.
she is our X factor for the academy, and a great advantage is that she, on a regular basis, pops in, speaks to players, takes pictures, gives signatures, and if you're lucky, she will be on court with you and hit a few balls with you. My vision or my mission is to offer a program that is systematic, aligned, and specific. And that's how we try to make tennis players, but also better persons.
I believe this is the place that...
Okay, we're now, I'll skip this part. We get into a number of people saying that they like coming to us. This was Sirana Kirstea, by the way, who's playing, yes, in 5 minutes. She'll start playing the semifinals in Nuremberg. So she comes regularly to our academy. But why I wanted to show this clip, or a little bit that Kim has mentioned, and myself as well, is the following. We have a vision and mission to make tennis players. That's quite obvious as a tennis academy. But I think the way we do it, I think makes us stand out a little bit in comparison to the Nadals and the Muratoglous, okay? We don't have the critical mass, okay? We've got 10 outdoor courts, 8 indoor courts, and that allows us to make it a sort of boutique style academy, you know? We know the background of all the players, the parents, who they're coaching with. We cooperate with the coaches that they work with at home, okay, which is something that is impossible for Bollettieri or Muratoglou to do. So we can have this personalized approach, you know, which I think helps us to also integrate technology, and probably also helps us a little bit more to have more female players, okay? Because that is something that we do have, and of course that has got to do with the name of Kim, but I think it's also the way that Kim, how she describes it. She wants the academy to be like she would have wanted it when she was still playing, okay? I mentioned 3 words: systematic, aligned, and specific. It is something that whatever I decide to do with the academy, whether it is on court or off court, whether it's implementation of technology, it needs to be part of that vision. And I think that's an important message I think you need to take home as well. Technology is nice, you know, and there's a lot of information available on Google, you know, in presentations from Siril. Everything is out there, but you need to channel it and you need to use it in the correct way within your structure. So make sure, this is what I have, but make sure you have your own vision and your own way of integrating all these things. Yeah? And for me, there needs to be a system. We're at A, we need to go to B. How are we going to do that? It needs to be aligned. You know, all the people in your team need to be aware of what the common goal is and how to use certain elements that you want in the program. And it needs to be specific enough. And there's enough data these days available to do that. Very quickly on a few numbers. We've got around 35 pros playing or high-performance juniors that have got some flexibility in school. In total, 400 hours of coaching per week, which is almost at maximum capacity if you count the number of hours that we have. We're in a very small little town in Belgium, on the east of Belgium, but we've attracted now 61 nationalities to come and train here. I've got a great team of people in place which allow me to actually start to travel a little bit more after 5 years of setting up the academy. We work with 2 full-time fitness coaches, which I think is essential in any modern academy. I was a bit surprised, by the way, that today in both academies that we actually didn't see a proper gym in the National Tennis Center. I presume there is one, but we work with 2 full-time fitness coaches. I think these days, saying something about fitness and everything that Siril has learned us, I think 30 years ago, you could become fit by playing tennis. I think these days, you need to be fit in order to play tennis at a high level. Yeah, so that's a very, I think, different approach from a few decades ago. Our best players are Elise Mertens, who you might know with a career high of 12, and then Kimmer Koppians, who actually yesterday won the 3rd round in the French Open, so he's in the main draw on Monday in Roland Garros. And we had some nice visitors coming to us as well. The reason, I don't think we've got big numbers. We will never have big numbers, but we do it in the style of Kim, and that allows us to have actually this integrated approach, I think Piotr called it, or this interdisciplinary approach, where there is the performance management, which is absolutely crucial. And it's actually something that I've developed together with Simon Jones 10 years ago when I was working at the LTA, because that was the first time. Yesterday I mentioned I went from Belgium and I went into the LTA, and there were a lot more specialists in every area that we had to work with. And this performance management system is something that is crucial these days because there's a lot more expertise around. Okay, and these days, what I do at the Academy, I am not necessarily coaching a player. I'm sometimes with Elise or with Sorana on tour, but I'm actually just safeguarding the whole project that everybody plays their own role correctly. And that is a very important task, I think, for you as head coach or as a technical director of the federation, to make sure that you don't just pile everything on top of each other, because that's not necessarily to the best benefit of the person in the middle, and that is our player, okay? So technical support is obviously something that is important, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Yesterday we didn't start singing, although there was a karaoke bar, but these words are coming from the song from who? Any music connoisseurs here? From this guy, Bob Dylan, Times They Are Changing. Okay, and they are changing rapidly. And there is a danger, because let's talk a little bit about that, what it means for the tennis industry. Technology is something that it's a tool, you know, that in many cases allows us to measure things more specifically, whether it's about the load, whether it's about, you know, we've had a stopwatch for quite a few decades already, but we can now measure a lot more specific the different aspects and the different factors that a tennis player needs. And we can use them to measure and to look for improvement. I've put entertainment behind there as well. You know, on the WTA and ATP, they use the Hawkeye system also as a sort of entertainment for the crowd, and obviously it helps the chair umpires. But I don't think we should underestimate the use of technology of that part as well. We all have an app on Huddle or what's it's not called? Yeah, it's Huddle Technique, it's called. We use various things, and obviously we measure and we look at things to make the player better, but it can also be a motivational tool to just show them something, for somebody who's a bit more visual, to motivate somebody, you know, to perform better. So it's part of, I see it also technology as an entertainment aspect, to actually create some variety in the day-to-day routines that we have to do. There is a lot of research in the last few decades. Thanks to this technology, there is a lot more research done, and it gives us direction where the game is going. If you look at statistical evidence from matches from a guy like Margarit, he gives us a different insight in how actually a match is developing. You know, also Craig O'Shaughnessy has given us a lot of, you know, useful, you know, food for thought on how matches are played and how we maybe should apply that in our practices. On Google and YouTube, you can find everything. Okay, the word doesn't exist, but I call it Googleable. You know, you look for it and you'll find it somewhere. And there's a real danger for us in the tennis industry, because yesterday we talked about the more centralized approach and the more decentralized approach. This information was not available 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, it was very normal. If you got invited or selected, you know, to a national tennis center, you know, you went there because that's where all the knowledge was. You know, the internet was only just coming up and there was no research. So this was a completely different approach than now when you have a kid and his coach 500 kilometers from your national tennis center. They want to find a forehand from Roger Federer in super slow-mo. They'll find it somewhere. And they maybe draw their own conclusions on it. So I think within the coach education system, I think we have to be smart in how to address, you know, the new generation of coaches, okay? Because they can find a lot of information themselves. So we need to be smart in how to make our courses interesting with e-learning. I've heard that in, Cesar told me yesterday, you do level 1 and level 2 in Portugal already, mainly on e-courses. And I think that's really listening to the needs of your customers, in this case, the coaches. But there's an overall challenge for tennis, I think, or for coach education directors in every federation. Tennis is a sport where if you have played a little bit of tennis, you can very easily in your local club start hitting a few balls, and you do that well, and you can verbally, you know, explain yourself, and you know, the people that you're doing some sparring with, they like it, and before you know it, you know, you do this for 2 hours, and before you know it, you do it for 10 hours, and before you know it, you know, you're in a full-time job without actually having a qualification. It's possible. I think we need to motivate, you know, with certifications and continued education, we need to motivate our coaches to keep progressing and keep learning. But actually, you know, there's a real danger, and it's more difficult in tennis to control it than in football. You will not coach in a Premier League team without having gone through all the stages of qualifications, because there's a lot more social control. In tennis, you can be in a Grand Slam box, you know, without actually having any qualifications as a coach. So there's a real challenge. So this was a bit of the introduction. Let's get into the technology part. It's a quote that I've used for the first time, now more than 10 years ago, at the LTA in a coach conference. Coaching is an art, it's not a science. I think we've all heard that. But I think, with everything that is available, I think it is also an art to integrate that science into our coaching. And that balance we need to have correct. I don't think we should zoom in too much into having everything that we know and everything that we read and put that in our toolbox. That's why I often refer to my carpenter, my handyman at home. You can have a toolbox with you with a lot of information. But the important aspect is to take out of the toolbox what you need when you need it. If I'm hanging up a painting against the wall, I need to know if I can do it with a little nail or if I need to use a drill. That's what makes the difference between the good coach and the excellent coach. It's not if I have a drill and a hammer and I don't know what in my toolbox. If you don't know how to use it, you know, you're going to mess up your player, okay? So try to use the technology in a smart way. Don't overload. So a few tips and thoughts extra. Don't take it to extremes, okay? We've seen the approach from, what's his name, Dolph Lundgren, the Darko or whatever. Ivan Drago against Rocky Balboa. We all know who won this boxing match, okay? So technology is not the solution. Technology will not make you tennis players. It is merely a tool, and it is like technique. You know, it is something that could be a solution to a certain problem. Technique is a tool to make you achieve a tactical outcome. But if we do want to look into the future, let's have a look at this clip, which when I was in China in October last year, I saw this on my screen when I was in the gym. Have a look at this. So he's playing badminton against a little robot. I don't think tennis is ever going to get that way, but I am talking at this moment with people from the Flemish government about the following thing. And this is virtual reality tennis, okay? We don't know where we're going to be in 10, 20 years, but these people that are investing in this product, this is not the Belgian product, by the way, this is a guy from the States, but there is virtual reality tennis possible where you get feedback on the outcome of your movements and you can actually learn how to perform simple motor skills. They've done it in volleyball, with a simple underarm serve. You know, that's very simple. It's a very simple movement, but it is working in volleyball. And tennis is a lot more technical and a lot more complex, but you know, people are looking into this. So if we talk about technology, I think in 10, 20 years, if I'm still invited to come here and talk, we might be looking at some players with glasses. Look, technology. You know, when you make your analysis of your player, you know, and you start with a very global situation and you're looking for solutions, this is where you need to see if technology can help you. And it can be on a wider scale, you know, playing matches, doing match analysis, or you can narrow it down and go to very specific things to actually measure, you know, a vertical jump, strength, etc. That's where we need to use technology. Technology is a catalyst to make all these things easier. Don't overemphasize technology. Conditio sine qua non. Somebody knows what that means? It's Latin. The Italian guy can't answer. Yes, that's it. So it's a necessity. Okay, we can have a big toolbox with a lot of information. We can have the best technology, the most advanced, and I'm going to show you something really funky later on. We can have all of that, but we will never, what I said yesterday, make a racehorse out of a donkey.
Stadig intet nyt, med en undtagelse. Kom. Så en mere. Den går koldt. Der, ud.
Okay, we need talent. It doesn't matter if you don't have talent, you can throw a whole lot of technology on top of that not talented player. It will not make the difference. Okay, so also there, be smart and make sure that your players have some talent before you start drifting off in some area which is not relevant. The basics still need to be in place. Now, talking about talent, I would say a few years ago, I would look for the talented players. I would walk around and I see the kid with a racket and I think like, wow, you know, he or she can play tennis. That's pretty cool. These days, I'm actually looking for something else. And I'm looking for another conditio sine qua non, something that is essential. It's a condition without you cannot succeed. This is a girl in the living room of her house, moving all the furniture away, drawing a net against the wall, the freshly painted wall for mommy and daddy, and she draws a net and she plays in the living room. That is what we need to look for before we start focusing on other irrelevant things. It's the intrinsic motivation that is more important than technology. Okay, we must not forget that. It's actually a task. I'm sure there's parents here, you know, people with children. That is the ultimate goal for our children, to find something that they like doing, and when they like doing something, when it's fun, they want to do it more, and when they do it more, they will get better, and if they then have talent, then it can become really interesting. But too often, we are looking at a very young age, and Piotr gave us some nice examples, we're looking at a young age for the talented kid who actually, after making maybe 3 mistakes, is not running to pick up the ball anymore. Okay? And that's a kid that will clear the first hurdles very easily, but when the going gets tough, and we've got a few professional players in the crowd here, when the going, it's a very long journey, okay? When the going gets tough, those players will drop out. So make sure you always find that passion within the children, okay? And then you top it up. Now, I've inserted something from this morning, the people who were with us this morning at the National Tennis Center. Too much passion is also not good, okay? Especially if it happens on the side of the court. This is a mother watching her kid playing. Yeah. So she's happy, he won the point, okay? But intrinsic motivation, okay? This is over the top. Okay, but find it in your children. It's essential, okay? Good. 2 case studies I would like to present to you, and one is about measuring specific endurance for tennis players. A lot of research has been done by Weber, Ferrauti, Fernandez, and some of you might have read about them. It's like a shuttle run test on a tennis court with a swing, without a swing, with a ball machine, without a ball machine. We've now used technology to make, in my opinion, the most advanced specific endurance test that has been developed, okay, at the Academy. And this is thanks to a technology which is not cheap, which is very special. And it is on the left side, it's a stellar, court that we have with in total 13 cameras. We have 8 Hawkeye cameras and 5 video cameras that work in a synchronized way. Okay, of course, this is not a very realistic picture, but what I'm going to show to you is hopefully motivating you enough to actually find your own ways, what you do on the right side, with measuring, with a stopwatch, writing something down in a logbook, to actually motivate players, to motivate the players by actually logging and measuring performance on a practice court, because that's ultimately what we've done at the Academy there as well.
It makes you a better tennis player without.
Can we have some volume maybe?
I think it's perfect. It analyzes everything.
This could really, really improve everyone's game. Why wouldn't it?
It's the way forward. It's tennis in the modern era. It's an often used expression that coaching is an art and it's not a science. I want to turn that cliche around, and I would say it's going to be an art to integrate science into coaching.
You can test your physical strength, your improvements. This is something that I would have liked to have had during my career.
It's really important that they can compare where they are against the professionals.
It's all about trying to be the most complete tennis player that you can be. With the Hawkeye system, it creates that. So I'm very, very proud.
Okay, so this is basically what we can measure with our technology. You have the court and you have all the trajectories of the balls, and also, detailed pie chart where these balls are landing, etc. We can track the position of the player on the ball. We have information about the ball quality, how much spin, the speed of the ball, where it lands, obviously. We also measure physical parameters, the heart rate and lactate. In total, we have 72 data per stroke. You hit one forehand and we have 72 data, which is, of course, way too much. And that's why this is a coaching tool, but it provides, with thorough analysis, it provides very useful outcome that you then give to the player. Later I'll give an example of Janina Wickmeyer, who doesn't need to see all this stuff. She just needed to know the outcome, and we made a decision based on the data analysis that we've done. I'll come to that in a second. But just to briefly show you how we can compare things with simple pie charts, where yellow is 4 points, it's in the best zone, and you can do that between different dates, you can do that between different players, okay, and you can measure your performance. We can look at the variability of speed and precision, because speed and precision that's like power and control, and they keep each other in balance. What I often ask, based on data that we sometimes collect, is if a player has got good control, I would ask them to add 10% of speed, okay? Do exactly the same exercise, but now, load a bit earlier so you have a little bit more body weight going into the shot, and try to add 10% to the speed of the ball. This will result, most likely, in maybe a drop of control, okay? And then the goal is to get the control and the consistency back up to that same point where you can keep that 10%. Or maybe you don't play that 10% the whole time, but when you're at your base level, every once in a while, you need to go to that 10%, and you need to do that without losing control. Okay? For those people who know something about motor learning, this is the law of Fitz, who actually has looked at this balance between speed and precision. We do lactate test as well during our performance test. And this lactate is a sign of fatigue, and we can then, the interesting thing is, rather than doing it on a treadmill where you have your lactate building up, we can here correlate it with the outcome of the ball. And that is the very specific thing about this test. Okay, we don't just see the buildup of the lactate, we can actually look how it actually affects your performance with a tennis racket. We've included a relativity of mistakes. Okay, so we see if your ball is 30 centimeters inside the baseline, 30 centimeters behind the baseline, but there's a big difference. If something is 5 centimeters out or 1 meter out, we lose the point. But one is a small mistake and the other one is a big mistake. Okay, so we've tried to incorporate that. If a player gets fatigued and starts to make mistakes, this mistake doesn't weigh as much than this mistake. Okay, so it's also using technology again to become more precise in that. By the way, this is maybe something interesting whilst we're talking about hitting balls out and losing the point. From a motor learning perspective, if I need to throw a ball to that last couch there, okay, and I do that test to that couch the whole time, or I split the group up, and I'm going to take you guys as an example. The left side is practicing throwing a ball in the last couch here, and the other ones are throwing a ball with the closest one in the middle. Close, middle, and that part is doing far throwing. Now we do another test. We do an exam with the whole group, and we do a distance that is not any of these couches. It's even further. It's against the fence at the back there. And everybody does that test. Which group will perform better in that test? It's actually the group who's done the 2 different varieties in distance. Okay? Not the one that's doing only the single distance throw. Now, if we translate this to tennis and to making mistakes, when we ask our players to play deep and long balls, and we get closer and closer to the baseline, and we give them feedback, yeah, a little bit longer, very good, and they're close to the baseline, and then all of a sudden it's behind the baseline, it's mistake, bad ball, okay, it's out. But it's actually only 10 centimeters difference from a very good ball. The point that I want to make is, from a motor learning perspective, we have to allow our players to hit out. Okay? Don't do it the day before a match or the warm-up before a match, but actually, during a certain phase where technically they are learning something, it is good to put a cone behind the baseline. Because when they feel in the same technical frame of the shot what they need to do to hit the ball 1 meter out or even 2 meters out, they will actually feel much better what it is to hit on the baseline as well. Okay? So something to take home. You all know the expression, thinking out of the box. Well, this is hitting out of the box. Okay? But from a motor learning perspective, it does work. Another interesting aspect to think about using technology, we have one image, we have one stroke, but, we have one image and we film it from 5 different angles. And why is this important? If I film with my iPad or iPhone a stroke on the side and the next stroke I'm going to go behind and I film, it's actually 2 different forehands. So it could be dangerous to draw conclusions out of these 2 clips when we're actually talking about 2 different results. So when we are filming, we can actually film one and the same shot from 5 different angles, okay? Which I think from a technology point of view was quite nice. So what have we done? We've made sure that we had a ball machine that could perform a valid test, the Pro Match ball machine. Instead of running 3 minutes on a treadmill or on a bicycle, and where every 3 minutes the speed of the treadmill goes faster, or you have to produce more power output on your bike, we actually increase the frequency of the balls that are shooting at you. So you start at 6 balls, cross court, then 10 seconds rest, 6 balls down the line. You do that for 3 minutes. And after 3 minutes, there's 1 minute rest. We take lactate, heart rate is continuously monitored. And then the next 3 minutes, the ball machine will start shooting a little bit faster. It's a maximal endurance test, which basically means the test stops when the player is completely kaput. Okay? And in the beginning it's very slow. You know, we start at a pace of 20 balls per minute, which is basically, it gives you 3 seconds to go from one corner to the other corner. That's like walking pace. But if you do that 5, 6 times, 3 minutes, with the balls going faster and faster, you soon will get to a maximal heart rate. We have players that have gone to 13, 14 millimole lactate, which is, you know, very, very high for a tennis player. So it is a maximal endurance test. We'll have a little clip how that looks in real life. So you can see from the reaction of this boy that this is not just a test, but it's also a good interval training, of course. Once you do this test and you can last between 25 or 35 minutes, you actually have done a very good test that day, and you probably don't want to do too much more on that day. So we look at the intervals, and what you see here on the second small red arrow on the left side of the screen, we see at what point in that 1 minute a player doesn't recover anymore. Okay? We link it also to the lactate, and then we're actually going to see at what point his strokes are starting to drop in terms of precision. They start to play a little bit higher, it loses speed, it loses precision. So we can actually find data that are interesting for the tennis coach, but also for the fitness coach, because the fitness coach knows at what point a player starts to make mistakes. So it's no longer when the player necessarily reaches their anaerobic threshold, it is when the player starts making mistakes. So in that respect, I find this a very specific endurance test for tennis players. And to give you an example from Kim herself, she never liked running on a track or doing some longer runs, but doing high intensity interval session with her on the court with a tennis racket, she would go through the wall and actually keep a very high quality of precision along the way. And unfortunately, you know, Kim has never done the endurance test. She's not fit enough anymore to really do this, but I am sure that this would have been a test where Kim also would have been #1 in the world. Okay, so in that respect, I think her physical, specific tennis endurance was very high, but please don't put her on a treadmill or on a track, okay, because she would fail miserably, okay. So some general data that we can measure, you know, to net clearance, we can make differences between forehand, backhand, boys, girls, different ages. So there's a lot of data that we were collecting, but the important is it needs to work for the player. Remember the picture with the player in the middle. This technical support is just one small aspect of a big team that is making a tennis player. And then, after we measure these things, and yesterday there was a very good comment on, you know, the player app and putting with Gary putting these data in, we have to measuring something once is not good enough. You know, you need to measure at least twice to see some progression. You know, measuring for the sake of measuring is pointless. So you need to have a before and an after, always. And then comes the difference between the good coach and the excellent coach. Because what's next? You need to analyze these data and you need to find a solution how you can improve the numbers. And that's still, you know, the coach that needs to make a difference. But we can use technology. I mentioned Janina already. Janina's serve on the second serve was a little bit dodgy. I had a feeling, a subjective feeling, that if she was going to bring her foot up, you know, which creates a little bit of the hip segment that will help her to also drop the right shoulder a little bit, and Cyril gave a few nice examples of that one, not too much with the hip forwards as well. But as soon as you bring your foot up, it's a little bit easier to drop the right shoulder and the right hip. And it gave her, in my opinion, a better trajectory over the net for her second serve. Now, we can say this as coaches because we've read a book and we've listened to Cyril, etc., etc. But what technology has done here is, you know, she served 30 times with one serve, keeping the foot back. Then she served 30 times with bringing the foot up. You know, we get the results. She's serving higher over the net. She doesn't lose any precision and she doesn't lose any speed. It's a no-brainer. So this is where technology has helped us to make that decision for Janina. Here's another one. Choice of direction, okay? We have Elise Mertens and Janina Wickmeyer at the Academy, and this is a test that I've done with them 2 years ago when Janina was still better than Elise. You know, this has now changed dramatically and we should do the test again. What we did is, we did this endurance test with fixed directions of the ball. Forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand, forehand, backhand. The results there were the same for Janina and Elise. With a fixed direction, there was no difference. Then I've played around with the machine a little bit, and this was not the specific endurance test, but it was a series of 6 balls, but random directions. So it was 1 forehand, 2 backhands, 1 forehand, and another backhand. Okay, and every series was different. And there, Janina, who at the time was the better player, scored better than Elise. So Elise was slow in changing direction when she didn't know where the ball was coming. Some of you who might know Elise, who was also a reasonable junior player, what does Elise Mertens do when it gets tough in a match, especially as a junior, now a little bit less? She just moved backwards. She was giving herself more time because she was not fast enough close to the baseline to change direction. So she gave herself more time, which is a very smart thing to do in her case. And she won a lot of matches with it. This was not good enough, you know, to get to the highest level at the WTA. So together with her coach, we prepared the 2017 Australian Open, and we really specifically worked on that aspect. You know, one was getting in the corner and getting back out of the corner, getting stronger there, and also with the choice of direction, without being allowed to go backwards. So this is important to look for also creative ways to work on that. You can use a fitness coach off court, but we actually also use a very interesting tool on court, okay? And here Elise is with a resistance band, and we all know the equipment that our fitness coaches use, but this is actually a standalone tool that you attach the player to, and then you can work on these changes of direction because it rotates, and it's a very interesting one to work on the reaction on the return in this instance, but she's also done it on the wide forehand. So Elise doesn't know where the coach is serving, okay? So, and she has this resistance band. Okay, so this is how we worked on getting Elise stronger and not losing her center of gravity that always has to be in between her 2 feet to actually change direction and become stronger there. Here's an interesting point though, for those of you who maybe have got experience with these resistance bands. Okay, what Elise was doing, or when you run to a wide ball, this resistance band is actually pulling you back, so you get a bit lower, you get stronger. But actually, by the time you reach the ball, you are probably at your slowest because this resistance band is pulling. So you start very fast, but if it gets really tough, it actually slows you down. Is this realistic in a tennis match? No, if I have to run for a 3-meter shot, I'm sprinting there, of course I need to slow down. But I want to first get there as fast as possible, and actually I need to keep the control at the end of my stroke whilst I'm breaking down. And that's the eccentric work. When I'm pushing out with this elastic band, I need to use my muscles, need to get together, concentric, in order to create the distance. But when I'm breaking down, this is eccentric work for our muscles, because we are slowing down whilst our muscles get sort of made longer, okay? Concentric, eccentric work. In this little clip here, we're doing the difference. So here, the resistance band is completely stretched, and actually the person is running, okay? And actually has got a much higher speed on the moment that they play the ball, which is very important. So when you use technology or when you use new equipment, always make sure you use it in the correct way. The fit light system, which you might know, Elisa has to react to the disc that is lighting up. A very good tool that we've used actually to make her react quicker. Okay, so we've made her stronger getting in the corner and getting back out of the corner, and we've been working on her reaction so that she can much quicker decide which direction she needs to get to. On the clay specifically, on the indoor clay, it's artificial clay. Kimmer Kopians working here using this field power as well. Kimmer, by the way, this is the guy that that won yesterday and will be playing for Belgium on Monday in the French Open. So good performance. Tiago Cassao. Here, Rui, I mentioned that I was going to bring him up here. This is a test from a Portuguese player that was with us a few years ago. And we've used this technology also to test with rackets. Okay? He did a test on the top right with his normal racket. Okay, that's the pie chart. And then he was playing with a racket and he was deciding, you know, which racket he should play, whether he was going to make it a bit heavier. And we had his racket customized, made it a bit heavier. And immediately he had more depth and he had better results with the heavy racket. Okay, we've done, because he was developing into a nice athlete, we've then used the heavy racket in combination with transfer, with the complex training, with using a medicine ball, and then actually playing with the heavy racket afterwards. And again, there was an increase in performance. So, bottom right bottom right, sorry, was the start pie chart, and the other three are different ways of how we improved his performance by using this complex training and changing actually also his racket that he was playing with at the time. Another example, closed stance and open stance. We have measured the difference there, and what we saw with the closed stance is that a player can actually hit harder when they step into the shot. Okay? So when you can use when we hit a ball, we always have to rotate our shoulders. We could do it like this, but there's always a shoulder rotation. When we step into the ball, we basically go from the back foot to the front foot. It's the translation into the shot, the moving of the body weight that initiates the rotation. An open stance is a more angular shot where we have, you know, the loading in the whole kinetic chain. The loading when we drive up will initiate the rotation of the shoulders. And we've discovered two things. When you step into the shot, the same player plays harder when they step in than when they play open stance. When they play open stance, the player had a better precision playing cross-court balls to the sideline. So a very practical example from this player in a WTA event is if she has to open up the court against a player that is not moving so well, and she really has to open up the court, we've asked her to really play close to the baseline and take balls soon after the bounce in an open position and play more open stance. Against another opponent who was moving very well, but who she had to put under time pressure, we said, actually, you know what? You can step 1 meter back, which sounds a little bit strange, but the position 1 meter further back allowed her to get behind the ball and step in and use her body weight a lot more going into the shot. Okay? So a way of how we use the technology to actually make a tactical adjustment for the player. Again, what I've shown you now is, you know, I call the Hawkeye system, I call it a Ferrari. You know, it's a Ferrari, but you need to have a serious driving license to be able to use it. It's not very practical. The amount of data we get is absolutely fantastic. And in the research domain of tennis, I think we've developed something that is really state of the art. We've taken advantage from it for the Academy, but commercially and worldwide, this has not been a revolution, okay? So we've learned our lessons as well. So I want to present you a second case in the Academy, what we're gonna use and where we can have a wider range of people influenced by our research and our tools. And it's gonna be part of a KCA methodology where we actually bring our knowledge together and gonna put this in a tool that exists already, which is Tennis Live, but Tennis Live is a web-based program. It's very similar to what Garry yesterday showed us from Metrifit. This has been developed for the Dutch Tennis Federation. Some of you might have seen that, and we've got our own version in the Academy, okay? This is a platform, a portal, where the player can log the data for the matches, training, the diary, when they have to be on which court, etc. But also, we can upload video material. So we can make the goal setting sheets, just like you can do with a lot of online diaries, but we also have the option of putting videos on the portal, which is very nice. So you go to a tournament in Spain, and with your GoPro, you film the match. In the evening, you upload it in your hotel room, and the coach at home can start analyzing the match for you, if you want. That's how easy it is, okay? I could be filming here, you know, some of you in the audience, and I upload it straight away into sort of my account in Tennis Live. Yesterday, some of you might remember that Garry, they've learned a few things, you know, in their first 21 days. And do you remember what his recommendations were, or what he was going to do for the future? What did he learn? There were a few things that were not so practical. It was a web-based program. This is also a web-based program. But he talked about developing maybe an app, okay? An app that is offline available, that's on your smartphone, and that is much easier to use, okay? So, and with this app, rather than having this exclusive technology of the Hawkeye technology, with this app, we actually want to reach out to the critical mass. And this could be 10,000 Chinese coaches, you know? This could be the parents, you know? Maybe the mother that we've just seen on the screen. Maybe she wants to have this app, okay? And learn a few things, how she should behave when she's watching her son play. So, we want to go out to the critical mass. It has to therefore be very easy to use and offline available. And what you get in addition to that, and I think that is, Garry, I don't think, unless I missed it, didn't mention it, it's the uploading of the video material. You know, these days, it is not so difficult, it is possible. You know, you put everything in the cloud, it doesn't need to be on your phone or in your computer, it is possible. So it's going to have a library with your own video clips from your match in Spain, but we can also load other video clips on there. You know, a match from Roger Federer or a stroke from Roger Federer that is applicable for the technique of my player. So we want to do that in various features. This library is going to be there. Some of you might have seen me present on this female tennis journey. You know, that whole book, we can all upload that into that app. Lesson plans, it will have a search function so that you can find exercises that are applicable for a certain age. Some of you might know the Tennis Australia app for kids tennis, which is a really, really good one. And you can filter there and have all the exercises for orange players, for that age group, all the exercises on serve, etc., etc. We can add some competition to that as well. And competition could be, it exists in football, eScout, where people can upload their own videos, you know, of keeping the ball up, for instance. And actually Real Madrid is using this, and they're using this as a database because they keep all the, they've got the right, as soon as you send it to this eScout platform, Real Madrid keeps it. And then people, everybody can like, you know, the kid who does the best tricks with the football. Okay? And this is, you know, an eScout program for Real Madrid. They've never seen the kid, but if that kid gets 100,000 likes, it must mean that it means something for all the people, so everybody is actually a scout for Real Madrid. Okay? But we can do fun competitions there. We can have Kim serving, you know, there's 5 cones and she has to serve and it takes her 2 minutes and 30 seconds to hit all 5 cones. We put that up and we make a challenge, and somebody can film the clip that they are doing without photoshopping, that they are doing the same test, and that they can actually beat Kim and do it in 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Okay. We can do all sorts of things, and this technology that we're doing now, you know, we've had some unbelievable years with the Hawkeye system, but this is much more towards the needs of our customers. And I spoke a lot about that yesterday. You know, in the philosophy, as a technical director from a federation, it is different than when you're in a commercial enterprise. Rui mentioned yesterday, of course, you invite players to an academy, to a national tennis center. In an academy, you know, you ask people to pay. And it's more difficult to make these things mandatory. But that's why you have to make it attractive enough so that they want to use it. You know, if I'm Gary, you know, in a national tennis center, you know, I would make it mandatory. And you can do that in a national tennis center. We cannot do that. Okay, so we try to make something that is really easy and attractive enough for the players who, you know, may want to pay for it. We can even, in the future, look at a certification for the coach. There was a level 2 course, but maybe we can all put that on an app. Cesar is doing this in Portugal already. Maybe we get to a stage where online you can actually get your certification. Okay, this is where technology can bring us. This is how it looks, the last few slides. You have on your phone a login. It's a player app or a coach app. You can fill in your well-being. Your calendar is on there. It's not too dissimilar as everything that Gary yesterday has shown us. You can do your fitness testing in there, and you can have your game evaluation and ultimately also your videos that are uploaded. So this, I think, I'm at 55 minutes. I think I had 1 hour, or not? Was it not 1 hour? Okay. So there's 4 minutes and 30 seconds for some questions about the vision, about technology, or maybe about the 2 case studies that I've presented. But I would like to say and repeat my own quote. It's never good to use your own quotes, but I do like this one. Coaching is an art. It is not a science. But please try to integrate science into your modern way of coaching. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Carl. Now we have a coffee break, so we'll do the questions after the coffee break.
Yes, of course, yeah. Coffee.
And we have some housekeeping information.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Carl. So we have a small gift for you.
Is it a Polar watch?
Yeah, it is not. It is not. We have something sweet for you today. Listen, so I have some housekeeping announcements. First of all, the dinner, we have moved it a little bit earlier so you can enjoy the rest of your evening. So the dinner will be served at 7 p.m. at the hotel. Then your departure will be placed at the desk in the hotel lobby where you have Tennis Europe banner. So please check if your flight details are correct and if your transportation is arranged accordingly. If not, please contact my colleague Philip so he can fix it. Then we will be having family photo, and actually we can do it right now. So I would kindly ask all of you to stand up and come to the front so we can have a nice family photo. And then whenever you come back, you will find feedback forms on your chairs. Please fill them in and give them back to us. Thank you.
So let's start the final session while you fill in those feedback forms. Those feedback forms are very important to us, especially the part where you can give us some interesting feedback, not just the scoring. It's important for us to know about what's your thoughts on the organization of the conferences, because we can use that feedback for the future conferences. So now we have our speakers, and the idea is to touch a little bit on some topics that maybe were not covered. Before I give you a chance to do some questions, I would like to ask, and I will start with Karl, to touch a little bit on the organization of sessions. We didn't talk during this all this conference in the specifics of how do you organize sessions, what are your concerns in terms of the academy, maybe what's the difference in organizing or preparing training sessions in an academy and in the national center.
Oh yeah, sorry. Hello, hello. Hello, yes. I think a big difference is that in terms of periodizing and planning tournaments in an academy, we are dependent on the parents who need to support the travel schedule. To put it very practical, when you go to the Belgian Tennis Federation, you pay a monthly fee. Parents have to pay something, but it's a very low amount. They have accommodation, they have schooling, and the coaches that are responsible for these kids can actually from A to Z decide what they're going to do. They play 3 tournaments, then they practice for 2 months, then they go for another 3 tournaments. They've got a very good control over that program. They are subsidized by the government for that. In case of Belgium, that's almost €1 million to run the top sport facility for tennis. And that allows you to do the right things. For us in the academy with Kim, we don't have that €1 million, which is a big problem. In fact, we don't get any support in Belgium. It is a completely centralized model, and there is no support for the private academies. So we have to make some compromises, you know, and unfortunately, those compromises are situated with the parents, and then I, you know, link that automatically to the money side of it, because they have to pay for that, and also logistically, our coaches have to work with several players and often with different age groups. Why is that? We don't have the critical mass in our academy. Okay, so, we don't have the critical mass in our academy to say, okay, somebody is doing everything under 14, somebody is doing everything under 18, and somebody is doing the pros. Because in an academy, you can also, when players come, you can say, this is your coach, Dermot is your coach, Cyril is your coach. When you sorry, in a national training center, that is. Huh? In an academy, a person might come to the academy because they know Cyril. And this is a 12-year-old boy that wants to come to the academy for Cyril, but maybe also the pro player that comes for Cyril. So it's a different mindset. So we need to accommodate, we need to, you know, because we cannot be as hard-lined as you are in a national training center. So we have to make a lot of compromises, And to finish my answer in a very practical way, how it works, we have on Google Drive a tournament proposal for each age group, 12, 14, 16, 18, and then the ITF tournaments, the professional tournaments. And the coaches, everybody who works with their players, they can put a proposal on there. We would like to go 2 weeks to Portugal. We would like to go 3 weeks to Spain. And they put that on the schedule. And I sit down every Monday afternoon with my two managers that help me run the academy. And then we go week per week. We look at, you know, the tournaments where coaches might want to go to with which players. And when we feel that it is an opportunity to go there as an academy, then I color it on the Google Drive. And by the way, parents can also see this, you know, so this is very transparent. You got the tournament proposal, and when I color the tournament orange, for instance, there's 4 people that want to go to Spain and 2 people that want to go to Portugal, then on that week I would color the tournament in Spain because it's with 4, you know, that coach is free to go with the thing. So I color that cell on the Google Drive orange, and by that stage, the coach who will go to the tournament makes up a fact sheet and then presents it to the parents. But then comes the next step, because in that fact sheet, you say, okay, we're going to Spain, a ticket is costing 300 euros, the hotel is costing that per night, we're going to be with 4 players. And then, of course, the coach needs to go with them divided by 4, but then, you know, one of the players or one of the parents decide, well, you know, this is a little bit too expensive, you know, I want to go maybe next month to another tournament, so they fall away. So then there were 3. Okay, so then you have to go back to the other parents and say, listen, it's actually not the cost of the coach divided by 4, it's divided by 3. You know, and so it's very, very tough to do performance tennis in a private academy. In that respect, it is still a dream. You know, I've worked for federations, you know, Norway, England, Belgium, and that still is a much more ideal scenario to do the right thing. We have to make a lot of compromises,
Dermot, would you like to give us a little bit on your take on the organization of the training session, especially what we do in the regional centers as I would say, a template?
I guess the actual training sessions, what I try to get the coaches at our centers do is to cover all aspects of the game, to introduce to the kids, especially the 12, 13, 14-year-olds, all aspects every 3 months minimum, but even monthly if they can. Obviously, it comes down to the frequency of the player, what they do, that they're going to spend more time in one area. But as a general overview of the centers, to, for example, one session would be, let's say, second serve return, the one person attacking the second serve, the other guy with the second serve trying to neutralize, stay there. And then everyone knows that this is the focus of the day. It can be changed, obviously, if necessary. Everyone knows this is the focus of the day, and then you adapt it to the game style of the player. What sort of a player? Not everyone's going to attack second serves that way. Maybe the guys might be going back and hitting heavy. The girls obviously more stepping in. So making the training sessions a lot of frequency on what they do and what's important in their game style. But every day to try over a course of a month, 3 months, whichever cycle you want to do, is to cover everything. And the reason for that is to develop all-rounded players and to make sure that they understand every single situation that happens in tennis, every single thing, they already have some idea. The second time round will be a lot better, third time round, fourth time round, and then eventually it will stick in pretty good.
And for Cyril, kind of a different take, because when we are organizing the daily schedule of work in a training center, there's always this situation with the physical conditioning, where to put it. Should we have different sessions, for instance, when they are doing sessions in the morning, in the afternoon? Can you tell us a little bit about your ideas on that?
So depending on what we call phase, if you're in preparation phase, where normally the fitness is the most important factors to develop, we have the focus on fitness and we adapt the tennis, normally, to the conditioning. After, when you go to the pre-competition or competition phase, it's the opposite. That is technical component, technical, tactical components are first, and then the fitness coach has to just adapt the contents with recovery to the contents of the technical session. So there is a lot of rules. Okay, you make speed before endurance and so on, but I think that the main thing is, depending on the periods, there is a focus on this aspect and the other one has to adapt. And more you go to the competition, more is integrated. That is, for me, there is no physical fitness, the morning and so on. You have tennis training, and inside the tennis training, you have physical components to improve or to maintain.
And what about, again to you, about the challenge? You are doing the conditioning of the players when they are in the center, but then they have to travel. This is one of the most critical parts in terms of the physical conditioning.
It's critical, and there is some papers from Australian, very interesting, because they tested some players. They live without fitness coach, that is alone, or with fitness coach, just to see the difference with players who make final regularly, or the ones who play in the first round, then have 4 or 5 days off without training. And they see a lot of differences. That is, without fitness coaches, the guys who lost the first round and after just have double or something, lost not all, but a certain amount of physical fitness, just because there is no training at all. And the opposite, the guys who go regularly to the final have a big training load from tennis performance, maintain some components of the physical fitness and decrease some other one because they don't have time to practice. So it's just what we call adaptation. That's it. We don't know. You go for 3 weeks. If 3 weeks you lost in the first round, normally it's 3 weeks of training. If you go to the end of the tournaments, maybe after you have more to recover between than to improve. So it's the problematic of the tennis. In team sports, they have this problematic, but they know that they can play 2 matches or 2 games per week. So it's easy, depending if you play or not. If you are players, they can. Tennis, we don't know if we have 5 matches, if only 1. So it's just a matter of adaptation.
Carl,
I think you are certainly more.
One idea that I've developed, and some of you might have seen it if you've read the Female Tennis Journey, it is if you make your periodization of tournament weeks and training weeks, clearly your training weeks are in function of your tournament weeks, but you have to adapt during the tournament weeks because you can control your training weeks with the load, etc., but not during the tournament. But what you could do, it's a standard procedure when you're at a tournament and you lose on the first round. The next day, probably, also mentally, you don't feel like training and maybe you have to travel to the next tournament. But actually, you could try the principle if it's a tournament week and you have established what an ideal tournament week should be in number of hours of tennis and number of hours of fitness, with the focus a bit more on tennis, but still maintenance of the fitness, that you could say you lose the first round, but you stay at the tournament or you keep playing practice sets rather than going into training again. So then you've done your 3 weeks of training and you have 3 weeks of tournament. During that tournament week, even if you lose the first round, you keep playing your matches. You do practice matches and you keep doing that. And you do your fitness in exactly the same way as if you were still in the tournament. In that way, you sort of simulate a little bit what a tournament week could be, and in that way, you can also practice for when it happens, because in the beginning you might lose every time the first round, but then all of a sudden you end up in a tournament week where you've played matches 4 days in a row, and at the end of the week, you've never experienced actually having 4 days of matches in a row, and how to adjust with your training, with your fitness load. So it's a way of doing that, Count how many hours. If you should be playing 20 hours that week, you play 2 matches of 3 hours, that's 6 hours. So you have to then still do 14 hours or whatever, or 10 hours of points. So you have to sort of get, work around with these figures and try to simulate, a tournament week, even if you're out of the tournament. Yes, there's a lot of practice. and players want minutes with 4 courts.
Yeah, just one more thing, Carl. You touched on your presentation. You were saying that you have on the academy 2 fitness coaches, and you said that for you this is extremely important. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I think the game of tennis has evolved so much, and I used to quote in my presentation, you know, I think Borg and McEnroe, they became fit athletes by playing tennis. You know, one may be a little bit more fitter than the other. These days, I think Djokovic and Federer, they play less hours of tennis maybe. They don't hit forehand cross courts for 1 hour. You know, if you hear the Swedish stories from the days, you know, they were playing hours and hours and hours of forehand and backhand cross court. And it made them fit, and it was good enough at the time. These days, with the material of the rackets that has changed, the racket head speed, the demands on the body, you have to, anymore. It is not possible. You know, you cannot play 4 hours forehand cross courts at a high intensity. So you need to prepare your body a lot more to deal with the stressors, or the fitness you know, demands on the body when you play. So I have 2 full-time fitness coaches, and the biggest challenge there is, you know, it's injury prevention as well as making the players fit. But the biggest challenge at the academy is exactly what, and I wrote it down actually, is the balance, who's in charge of what needs to happen with the players. I mean, it's an endless conversation. You know, I've got the tennis coaches in one ear, oh, you know, this, the players have to do that, you know, and then I've got, you know, the fitness guy in my other ear and say, oh, these tennis guys, they don't take time, you know, to develop the player. It's an endless discussion. But, you know, in a preparation phase, you know, I clearly say to the tennis coaches, listen, these 2 weeks, Kurt decides how much fitness they do, and we complement the tennis on top of that. And in the other, you know, weeks, it is more the tennis coaches. But, you know, I've got a very stubborn fitness guy who's, you know, there's a lot of diplomacy needed every week.
Dermot, do you want to compliment a little bit on
Well, I think what Carl brought up there is an extremely important point, and there's actually an example this week. And I think from a lot of us that have worked a lot in the developing regions, where the level of tennis is a lot lower, very often our players play first round, second round, third round, semi-finals, maybe a little bit of a match, but the first 3 matches are like irrelevant, and then they play one big match in the final. And I think what happens is that these players continue to play these tournaments, and they're not ready for a hard first round match, followed by a second round hard match, etc., etc. And a great example is actually this week, where one of the players at the Morocco Center, he beat number 15 in the world, first round, and it's almost like guaranteed, and I know that he's not going to win his second round match because he's just not used to that. So when you're doing the training, when you know, like what Carl's saying about do this sort of idea during a tournament week is a great idea, and also reproduce those tough tournament weeks actually in the training center, so that they get used to that sort of stuff, especially in the regions of our players where they're not getting used to that hard grind every day.
I think that for me an important thing, it was with Marion Bartoli at this time, to decrease the anxiety and the stress in tournaments regarding the match. I think that you have to keep your routines. That is, if you have 3 training sessions per day, you have to keep it. You decrease the volume and the intensity, but just to say, okay, 3 sessions per day, today I have a match, so I have my match, and I have another session, another. Just to say, okay, the match is just a component of my day training. Sometimes the players say, I have a day, a match, so no warm-up, no session in the morning. In the evening, no, because I have a second match in the other day. And with Moroccan players, I think we have a tour in India. I say, Guy, the first week you are on hard court, so normally you have no chance to pass. So we use these first weeks to train, 3 sessions per day. You are not used, but the goal is for the hard clay court, it will be the 3rd, to be prepared. So they ask me like that, sure. You play your match, okay, you win. We go to the session training. But they were not used. And I think that for the high levels, that's it. Morning sessions, match, evening sessions, just change the contents, but to be used to this routine.
I would like to open now for you to make some questions if you like, and then I'll have some final questions for our speakers. Any questions?
Hello, Alexander Boric from the Serbia Tennis Federation. I have a question for you. Can you explain how it's happened that in the last 10 years the most best players are coming from the Eastern Europe? For us, it's scientific to do what we see now in Serbia. We can do it. We have people can do it, but we don't have money for everything. But you have a lot of players who are coming from Russia, Serbia, Hungary, and they are the top players. Also, we have Mats Wilander a few weeks ago in Belgrade, and his answer for that question was that the people in the East Europe are still hungry, and they are ready to practice more than the people on the West Europe. Thank you.
I think Mats is probably right in my opinion, but I don't know enough about the Eastern European system. But it is something that, it is something that I have experienced that we have in Western Europe. We have too many distractions. You know, when one sport is not fun anymore, you know, they go and do something else, or they go and start playing PlayStation or whatever. There's so many distractions and other options, and I do think that the mindset of Eastern European players on deciding at a very young age, this is what I'm going to do, and I don't have any alternatives, and this is and this is sort of, you know, my way out. You know, I don't have any other reasons. I know that Irina Chismarova, I don't think she's here anymore, but she presented in Nice in October about this as well, and she pointed that out as well. You know, there's a different intrinsic motivation, also about having role models and how they approach practice sessions. So I do think that's one of the reasons. They're more hungry, maybe, than the Western European players.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. From my experience, the Russians, the Eastern Europeans have such high levels of intensity. Their attitudes are great. They're very, very hungry. And often coming from spending a lot of time in Africa and that, they don't have that same intensity and that same attitude very often. So I think that's a huge factor. And also that same on the attitude front of just like going for it, being aggressive, like dictating with their games rather than, you know, waiting and seeing. So yeah, that would be my comment.
Any more questions?
I wanted to know your thoughts about when a kid is entering a national tennis center, let's say when he's 13, should he be working with the same coach for until he's 18 or 19 or whatever, or should there be a coach who is in charge of the under 13, 14, and then he should be for a guy who is more working with the older kids? Because some people believe in that the kid needs to go with the same guy that he built the relationship with, or other people think that differently?
Yeah, I think from an organizational point of view, I think the structure is always more important than the individual. And I think from an organizational point of view in a federation, it makes a lot of sense to have somebody responsible under 14, under 16, and under 18. And players move on from coach. And I think, you know, it is an opportunity also for the under 14 coach, under 16, under 18, to know the level of standards and actually not make the same mistakes. You know, because if you go from 14 to 16 to 18, it's a learning curve for the coach as well. And actually, if you have the same person in place, I think that offers a lot of advantages also in communication with Tennis Europe, with the ITF, that you have one and the same person. But, okay, when I say that the organization is always bigger than the individual, there's always exceptions, you know, and I'm a good exception. You know, I was responsible under 14. When Kim came around to the academy at the age of 11, and she came to the, not the academy, National Tennis Center, and you know, she was offered a place at Bollettieri, you know, they could move there with the whole family, you know, everything they wanted. And the father just came to the technical director, to my boss at the time, and says, listen, there's this young coach here that Kim really likes, you know, we're going to the States, or this guy has to move up an age group with my daughter. And for some of you who have known Kim, when she was very special at a very young age. She did have a very good coach as well, but she was just she was a racehorse. She was a very special player. And this is the one and only time that my boss has made this exception and said, okay, now we're going to make some changes to the structure because we want to accommodate this very special person. But you know, she's the only one, in my opinion, in Belgium that has ever deserved to make that exception. And that's sort of, you have to sort of weigh up the pros and the cons. But in general, I would say have an age group captain or coach. I think that offers a lot of advantages in a federation.
One more question? If not, then I'll ask each one of you for your final takes on the topic of this conference. We had a lot of information from different nations. What would it be your takeaway from this? Now we'll start with Dermot.
Yeah, I wrote down a couple of things. I think most of the speakers talked about an integrated approach, a holistic approach. I think some of the, like Gary's presentation, he talked about the university and how he works with the university a little bit, and I think that's a really big factor for all the training centers as much as possible. If you do have an academy or a center, try to hook up with the nearest university because they very often have a lot of support, a lot of things going at the university, a lot of free things as well. So yeah, that would be definitely one of the things. I think we talked about the parent engagement programs and how important it is to you know, to involve the parents, and very often in centers we're very informal about it over a cup of coffee or whatever, so try and make formal programs, formal things, not just with the parents, but with the coaches, with everyone. Yeah, I think that's obviously the importance of technology is a huge factor, and I think that's the way things are going, and that's the way we have to adapt as coaches. So make an effort to start using apps, start using an athlete management system, and just get yourself in the deep end and get used to it.
Cyril?
Yeah, I fully rejoin Dermot and for the interaction you can have with university and tennis. Why? Because as scientists, problem of tennis is just a problem of number of players to have data from. For a team sport, it's very easy. You go to the team sport, you have 12 players. So you make a test, you have 12 players. Tennis, it's very difficult to find in the same group 20 players with the same ranking, with the same age. national training center, you can have that. So you just have to know that the university and the labs, they are searching for this kind of population. They have support from government, they have funds for the research. So each time, or every time you can have contact with university or private laboratories, but most of what university, try to bridge the gap and go on.
I've talked enough. Coaching is an art, it's not a science, but please make it an art to integrate science into coaching.
Round of applause, please, for our speakers. Then I will take this opportunity to close this conference. I would just like to say a few words just to thank the people that make these conferences possible. So the speakers who are a very important part of any conference. Also the team that helped to organize everything. So Philip is here. A round of applause for Philip, Maciek from Tennis Europe that helped us to organize all the conference, and of course to the Belarusian Tennis Federation. They helped a lot during the organization phase, especially Anton Juspa. To the Olympic Committee, these are spectacular facilities and they help a lot, not only the federation but also the sport. And my final thanks would be for you to take the time to be here with us. I hope that you take a good experience with you. Without you, without your interest, actually it makes no sense to make conferences. So this is the job that we do for you. Thank you very much. Okay, so see you at dinner. Dinner at 7.
And thank you for the feedback forms.